watch over and over again for the rest of your life, what is that movie?
Fuck. This is too early in the morning. Like my brain just like is already fried. I feel like from this question. We have to cancel the podcast.
By the way, this is 8 a.m. in Australia, almost 8:30. So
Shit. It has to be a Jackie Chan film. I'd say Rush Hour 1, like the
ooh,
original.
that is.
I'd go original. Yeah.
I'm so happy you chose that because I'm adding it to my watch list. And after Casablanca,
You haven't seen Rush
no,
Hour?
no, I have, but I'm rewatching basically all the
Okay.
recommendations
Okay.
that I'm getting. So thank
Yeah.
you for
Rush
that.
Hour 1 and 2 are both like, oh,
Gems. They're gems.
just gems.
Yeah.
Shanghai Night, Shanghai Noon as well. Like any
Oh.
Jackie Chan film, like me
Oh.
and Jackie go way back. Like first crush, first love, Jackie Chan.
Amazing. So we are live. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm here with Julia Hamer, med student, neuroscientist, yoga teacher, educator, and overall just an inspiring person. Someone that I've had the pleasure of getting to know a year and a half ago. We had some amazing conversations. And listen, I had to get you on the show to talk to you about creativity, social media, and the brain. And if you know me, I'm not into the woohoo stuff. I like talking about science. I like talking about facts. And especially in this time and age where a lot of us are self-isolating, there's some unusual pressures and stressors that might be around. And sort of navigating that and having a discussion around that, I think would be valuable. So first and foremost, how are you doing in the midst of this COVID-19 situation?
Hi. Well, you caught me on a you're at like 100 miles an hour. It's great. I gotta catch up. I have been on an interesting day today, I'd say so far. I didn't wake up feeling the greatest. I had a bit of a crappy email that I read in the morning and then it kind of threw off my day. So on a global scale, I've been really good. Just like this morning was not the best start, but we can get into how I'm going to change that
There you
later
go.
on. But I think the pandemic's been a bit of an emotional roller coaster. I think the start was definitely pretty rocky, pretty anxiety inducing to know what the world was going to look like. And I think a lot of people looked to me as a leader in the science community to try and explain COVID as well. And because there were so many unknowns,
Right,
that
right.
took quite a bit of time to try and understand the pathology and try to understand what we do know about coronaviruses. So that took up a lot of my time, which was just perpetuating more and more anxiety. But then once I sort of let that ship sail, realized that a lot of it is outside of our control. Life got really good. Marta and I are pretty happy in Australia, so we can't complain. And we've set up our own routine to stay healthy and sane during this time.
Nice.
But I messed up the routine this morning, which is why which is why I didn't feel as good this morning, because I think routine, especially in a time of uncertainty, is so important.
And that's what you call a teaser, folks, because we're going to talk about routine and its impact on your health and well-being. First, I wanted to start the discussion on this, and this is really where I'll just flat out say it. Talking to you about this kind of changed my overall perspective around social media and my relationship with social media. I was lucky to be at one of the talks that you put up in Toronto. I'll start with this. Can you just sort of talk about how you perceive, or not perceive, how you and the science community kind of interprets social media with respect to it being this unidirectional versus this overcomplicated web that some of us might see it as?
Yeah, I mean, social media is still a new area of science because it is a new aspect of our life. So understanding how it impacts the brain and how it will impact us long term is it's not a lot of research that we have on it. But what we do understand is that it's a very active process. So one of the things I talked about at my talk, Your Brain Online, is that often we look to social media as a break from our lives, that we'll go onto our phones, sit down on the couch, and we just start kind of swiping through videos, thinking that it's this mindless activity, like I'm just watching whatever, this
Right.
dog video, doesn't matter. And then something else comes on. Oh, Shirley, look at her abs. She's so great. Oh, look at Bob. He's cooking all the time. And we think it's very passive. But what's actually happening in the brain in that during that time is not passive at all. Our brain is actually on fire when we're on social media. The amount of cognitive processing that's going on, both at a conscious level, understanding that video, and then at a subconscious level, just the emotional, so our limbic brain, how that's creating certain pathways in our mind and making us feel certain emotions, whether it's at our conscious level yet or not. So I just tell people to be quite mindful when they're online, because it is not a break away from your work that you get to go online. That is you then experiencing a whole wealth of emotions, a whole wealth of experiences that are brought up, that are suppressed, that are changed, that are manipulated.
Right.
So it's a complex little app on your phone that with a click of a button, you just get into this whole other world. So it's intense.
So, and from what I recall, and I apologize if I get this wrong, is that with
That's
social
all right. It
media
was like a
and
year ago.
with
Actually,
especially
2 years ago.
it was
Yeah.
almost 2 years ago, I think,
Sorry.
2018. Yeah. Is it triggering the reward system in our brain? Is that why we keep coming back to Instagram, for example? Because there's certain things there that are hitting a system that, dates back millions of years, if anything. But is that why we're kind of coming back to these apps?
Yeah, for sure. So there's our brains have developed over, hundreds of millions of years. And the way I think of it, if you think of almost like an onion, there's like the inside of the brain, and then there's different layers that kind of go on top. And every layer is makes us human. So if you look at a primate brain or a rodent brain, it has the oldest part of the brain, which is known as the paleomammalic brain, which is like 100 million years old. And that's the survival brain, essentially. It's like the fight or flight, it's reward pathways, like, okay, this is where I get food, this is how, I find a mate and have some sex, and then I'll have all of the monkeys for the rest of my life. So that's the old brain. It's not a conscious thinking brain. It's not thinking about empathy or social cognition. The layers on top is what. Ooh, I don't understand how this. This is a Martin thing. This is Martin said here. Um, so when it comes to social media, the part of the brain that it's targeting, yes, it targets some of that higher cortical structures in our brain in terms of just understanding what you're seeing. But the reward pathway is part of that paleomammalic brain. So that's our
Right.
dopaminergic system that's in our deep subcortical structures in the brain. So we do tap into that survival part of our brain of reward, that something feels good. So it's not necessarily that it's an addiction. I talk about, people ask, am I addicted to social media? I'm like, no, like we're humans. We're pattern. We like routine. We like habits. That's just who we are. We're just creatures of routine, creatures of habit.
Right.
So it's just a learned behavior rather than an addiction. But it still taps into that same pathway of reward, so that you do get that urge to go back to it. Martin and I are learning to train. We're hoping to get a dog soon, so we're learning how to train a dog. And I mean, this is going to happen probably in a couple of years from now, or even like when you have a baby, it's like, how do you teach them? And it's very simplistic things of like, oh, you
Right.
did something good, here's a reward. So getting a like or getting a follow, those things can tap into that system of reward, and it can cause that feedback loop of going back to that behavior over and over again. Some people are more predisposed to get into stronger neural connections that you're going to go back a lot quicker. So some people that are more addicted, quote unquote, to social media versus, oh, you disappeared, your camera.
Oh, my feed might have stopped for you. I can turn that back
Oh,
on.
okay.
Yeah, 1 second.
Oh, all good.
Yeah.
So some people may be more predisposed to having those stronger neural pathways, which is why perhaps they find it harder to put down their phone. And some of us are a little bit more attached, probably because we didn't assign that social media means a lot to us. So, but it is tapping into those deep reward pathways.
Yeah, so one of the things you sort of demystified is that there is a lot of energy behind this processing. When we sort of absorb social media, our brain is firing, and there's a lot of energy being consumed here. What other sort of detrimental effects can happen if we sort of keep going back to this feedback loop, where we make a habit of, right before bed or when I'm in bed, my way of relaxing is just swiping up and down on my phone? What else can happen here?
So we start tapping into what's known as our default mode network. Only if you're kind of doing something really mindless. It's like you're looking at social media, but you're not really looking at it. Like you could be watching anything. It doesn't really matter. You're just kind of swiping. So if you're in that mindless swiping mode, that you're not really taking things in, your default mode network is essentially your state that your brain is in when you're not doing anything. So sometimes you're in it when social media, sometimes you're not. But if you're just washing the dishes or you're going for a walk,
Right.
that default mode network evolves around three things. So the first is that it's all about you. It's about what am I doing? How do I compare myself to Susie, who looks great in her whatever new outfit?
Right.
How am I a good cook because Bob's such a good cook? Like, what am I doing later? Oh, I should post a video like this. Me, 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 me. So your world is now all about you. You're not thinking about other people. It's all about you. You're just self-obsessed,
Right.
which is good for survival if you need to think about how you're going to live, but you become self-obsessed. A second thing is that you're never in the present moment. You're not like, here I am in my room on social media, like being very mindful of what I'm doing. I'm in the
Yeah.
present moment. Like you're not in the present moment. You're in this ruminating state. You're either in the past or you're in the future. So you're thinking about like, oh, I used to look like Susie, or like I used to have a girlfriend like Susie, or
Right. Right.
I one time knew how to cook this food. Or you're thinking about the future, like, oh, I'm gonna try and get as fit as Susie, and like, oh, like Bob, I'm gonna learn how to cook.
Right.
And the third thing is that you're always quite negative. We're not sure why, but it's not like, good for Susie. It's like, fuck Susie. God damn it, she's so hot. She's so hot. And Bob, you're such a good cook. God damn it. So it's not in this celebrating mode of other people. It's in this comparison negative mode about yourself, thinking about the past or the future.
Right.
And if you had to think about a break to give yourself, whether you're a content creator or you're just working anywhere in the world, if you need to take a break from your job, is that where you want to go? And this negative, self-absorbed, non-present self? Because that's kind of what happens with social media. It kind of overactivates that network. And then once you get off social media doesn't stop in your brain. You've now made this connection pathway so much stronger. So now when you do go for that walk, you're still thinking about goddamn Susie and Bob. You're like, those people are just so hot and cook so well. And I'm so ugly and stupid and I can't cook, and I don't know why I'm in this accent now, but that's just who you became, and it's just not a good day. So that's social media.
There you
Best of
go.
luck, everyone.
Now I know why your students love your classes. By the way, next time we're in Australia, we're definitely stopping by. So I gotta ask this then. I've sort of went, as this sort of COVID-19 situation came up, developed a quick workflow, started doing live streams, and then pretty quickly, just because of, listen to stuff you talked about and Martin talked about, did a quick health check and started to say, okay, I got to make a few corrections here. And one of the things was, you know what? After 9 o'clock, I'm not looking at any screens. And you know what? As soon as I wake up and turn off the alarm clock on my phone's going to stay and charge in my bedroom, and I'm just going to go and do my thing and focus on productivity.
Totally.
I'll ask you, it's just not, it may not be as easy for everyone. Even for me, it took a couple of weeks to kind of develop that. How do we kind of, and I hope I'm right here, trigger the frontal lobe and our higher thinking to sort of overpower our primitive mammalian brain to make these habits and to break away from these, this default mode?
Well, the brain is very plastic. You can train it to, I believe, to do pretty much anything, whether it happens quickly or in a very, very, very long time. So those are two things. Creating habits is one thing. Changing your default mode network is another. To dampen down your default mode network, meditation has shown to be so powerful. Not just while you're meditating. So while you're meditating, if we do like an electroencephalogram, or even if you meditated in an MRI scanner and you did a functional MRI to look at blood flow to different regions of the brain, your default mode network dampens down
Right.
while you're meditating, which is great because you're actually present. And then if you do meditate a lot, over time, your default mode network is attenuated. So it's also dampened down. So say you meditate every day for the next 60 days. The rest of the year, as long as you still like continue to meditate, maybe every couple of days, your default mode network is quite reduced. So when you are washing the dishes, you're going for a walk, you're far more likely to be present than you are to be in that ruminating, negative, self-absorbed state. So that's one thing I would say it's great to have in your routine. But then how to build habits, I mean, it's hard. Everyone always talks about hacks and this, like how to hack your brain. Like you can't hack anything. Like your brain's your brain. Like there's not like a secret pill or like a secret thing. Like everything takes work, but I mean, that's probably why I don't have like an award selling book because I'm not sexy at science. Science is boring. No, science is sexy too. But creating habits, it takes time. You have to truly want to have that change in order to make it happen. If you just think about like, oh yeah, it would be nice if I went to bed early and it would be nice if I was off my phone, like you're not going to change. Don't fool yourself. Don't fool me. Like no one believes you. But if it's something important to you, if you put salience to it, you say like, this is something that's fundamentally important in my life, almost like a survival mechanism. Like this needs to happen. It will happen.
Gotcha.
So it's all willpower. And if you make it that it's important to you, so like for me, my morning routine has been not to check my email. Is to turn off my alarm, wake up. Marta and I go for a walk right away, which has been amazing. Obviously, because we live in Sydney, we go by the ocean and we just get beautiful nature views to fill up our soul.
Wait, you mean you don't have a blizzard with 5 degrees outside like Toronto, like we had yesterday? You don't get it?
How do they know those words anymore? I'm just so Australian now, mate. But that has been good. So coming back to why I said this morning was a bit shit is because I made the mistake. I saw an email title that I really wanted to open, and I opened it, and it was not good news. And I was like, no! And then I went for my walk. My walker was just like a little kid of like a temper tantrum. It was like, the world's come just a bad place, and it was such a stupid email, and everyone's so stupid, and this day's crap, and the sun's barely even nice today. It's just like half nice, and and then I caught myself in it, and I laughed, and I called a friend, and I was able to get myself out of it, partially at least. And it just goes to show you that my routine the past 3 or 4 weeks has been so effective and so amazing that Marta and I have put ourselves in a really good place by just having our morning routine being very sacred and our evening routine of, phones off, computers off, shut off the TV, just have yellow colored lights, reading a book, not on our phones, connecting, and you're able to have a really good sleep. So it really takes care of your whole day when you bookend it with something that is going to be good for your soul and good for your mental health so that you can show up in your life. But it's interesting that like today was a really cool experiment, I guess, in a way of like, what happens if I go against my own rules? Like, oh, okay, you feel like shit.
It's almost like that lesson was waiting to be taught, right? Where you just, it was waiting for you.
And then we go on a podcast, like, how do you feel? I'm like, crappy. I just listen to my own advice.
I want to go back to meditating because this is one of those things that it gets thrown around a lot. There's apps for it. There's people selling books for it. There's thousands of YouTube channels for it. I just want to ask you straight, how does one, in the simplest way, get started with meditating? What's the easiest way that we can just do it? Because from my own sort of experiences, I know it's not that hard. And you don't need a subscription to a $100 app to get started. But I'll let you speak on this.
I mean, sometimes when people take your money, they just like, you have more like accountability. It's like when you buy a subscription to something, you're like, okay, like I pay for Amazon Prime. I might as well buy something now. It's just, sometimes it is good to spend the money. Like, obviously you don't need to. If you don't have money, don't worry. But if you do have money, sometimes it like gets you to the gym. Like I used to go to Equinox in Toronto and I'm like, they're taking $300 from me a month. Like I better freaking show up to the gym, do my bar class every day. So maybe spend the money, maybe not. I'm not probably the best person to answer this. I'm still, I'd say, pretty new in the meditation realm, just over the past couple of years. But it comes back to habits. If you really want to learn how to meditate and you're in a place in your life where it makes sense, it will happen. Mm-hmm. But forcing it is really hard. Like I know people are like, oh, I know I should meditate, and they keep beating themselves down for not meditating. I'm like, dude, if you don't want to meditate, don't meditate. It's good for you. So is apples. Like, but if you don't want to eat your apples right now, you're just not into it. Like, you don't need to do it. So it depends on what's a priority in your life. If you're really stressed and you find that you are in that ruminating state, that should be enough of a motivating factor to at least try it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's an app. Like I know Calm right now has like a free month during like COVID.
Right.
There's a couple of other apps I could send a link to you. I'm the mental health and well-being officer for City Medical Program, so we just created a list of all these different resources for students right now because they're pretty stressed. But yeah, there's if you look, there are a million apps, and I think the apps are great because there is this accountability that you get a little notification, whether it's Headspace or Calm or Insight Timer, saying like, hey, do your 5-minute meditation. So simple, just 5 minutes. Okay, now let's do 10 minutes. Okay, let's try maybe like 12 minutes. So that accountability I think is really great for when you're starting out, because it's not in our nature to slow down, and we're praised and people look up to you if you are go, go, go. Martin always talks about being on the grind. I won't use that language, but we're praised for overworking yourself. So no one's going to praise you for meditating. And you can't exactly Instagram capture like, oh, look at my meditation today. Other people capture their workouts like at the gym.
Damn it. Like, so I'm crossing it off my list right now. That was going to be my post for tomorrow, but I guess not. I'm just kidding.
I think I filmed my meditation once, but like my meditation was shit when I filmed it because I was like thinking about the camera falling off the cliff. I was like,
Very meta right there.
Yeah. So again, it comes back to the habits. If you want to meditate, there's a million options out there for you. And if you're feeling anxious or not present, stressed out, it's a great thing to try. And if it doesn't work and you hate it, that's okay. You can try again when you're ready. But for some people, they may not be ready to meditate until they're in their 30s or their 40s. Others when they're 70. Maybe, there's some 12-year-olds that are meditating. But there's a different point of your life where it makes sense. But I'm not going to force anyone to do it.
Well, number one, if you're a 12-year-old watching this and you meditate, please let me know as I just dropped my pen. Number two, listen, I'm not an expert. I can only speak to what worked for me. And what worked for me is one, sort of telling the story to myself and talking it up that, hey, if I can do this, it's going to have such a great impact on my life. And then starting at literally 1 minute. You start at 1 whole minute, and then the next day you're like, all right, I'm going to do 90 seconds. And then go and slowly building it up and rewarding yourself and saying, you know what, I am proud of myself for getting through that 2-minute exercise. And you kind of find a way to build this muscle where you keep coming back to it and you reward yourself with that. And what's cool, like similar to your email experience, you do this for maybe 2-3 weeks. And then when you don't do it, you really notice the difference, right?
Yeah. And it reaffirms that that's something that is beneficial in your life. So yeah, it's good to know that it works for you. And yeah, it is rewarding yourself. Like you're a little dog, give yourself a treat. Be like, I did a full minute today. And most of us feel pretty hyperactive, in our lives, especially if you're doing more than one job, you're always switching between different things. So yeah, maybe starting at a minute, 30 seconds. Can you just close your eyes and take 5 deep breaths for like 30 to 60 seconds and then see how you feel? Yeah.
There you go. And again, the reason I started with all this social media and mental health stuff is because I think that's probably the best place to start before you start looking at creativity and unlocking your potential and trying to be productive during this time. So now that we've covered everything, just kidding, we didn't cover everything, but listen, we covered a good amount. We only got 30 minutes here before we switch to Instagram. I want to ask you this. How can someone foster more creativity? And I know this is a pretty broad question, but from a mental health standpoint, from the brain, how can you look to be more creative, especially when your environment may not allow you to go and do the things you normally do, right? Where you're isolating a lot, where you're a lot of the same, you're seeing the same walls, the same bedroom. And, how can you sort of look to be creative and foster creativity in this environment?
It's a great question. I'm trying to figure that out for myself too right now. So if anyone's feeling that struggle, I am 100% with you. My explanation analogy that I've been using is that I have a cup or a reservoir full of energy, full of potential. And every time I give of my energy, whether that was filming a yoga video or doing a talk, or I was writing an exam for the first year medical students, those are all energy taking. So it's all depleting, well, not fully depleting me, but it's using up some of this energy. And I have a finite resource.
Right.
So if I'm giving out so much, I need to make sure that I'm also putting stuff in my cup so that reservoir doesn't dry out. Because when you dry out, that's when you get burnout. That's when you get more anxious symptoms. So like the less and less energy I have, that's the more symptoms of negative mental health symptoms that I'll get. That the anxiety or the depression, just the rumination.
Right.
So I'm very mindful of what goes in and out. So morning routine and evening routine, those are things that I'm trying to fill my cup up with watching a sunrise and a sunset. For me, that is magical, and that fills up my cup. Having nice tea, it sounds silly, but I love tea, and I spent $100
Oh
at
my
what's
goodness.
kind of like it's kind of like David's tea, but it's called T2 here, and they had a sale. I mean, it's not even good that they had a sale because I bought way too many.
You end up
But
spending more.
I know they get you those goddamn emails. They're like limited time offer. But I bought myself a beautiful teapot, just like little things that make me feel good. And now I have a cupboard full of tea so that every morning and like mid afternoon when I make my tea, it's something that brings me a little bit of joy. And
Right.
it's not bad for me. It's little things. So it's like what throughout the day fills your cup. Doing workouts are really important for me. So I make sure I move every day. Even if it's just a 20-minute little circuit or something, going for a jog, just doing a yoga flow, that fills up my cup. But as soon as, like I said this morning, you don't have that morning routine, already you take that hit of, okay, now that reservoir feels smaller and smaller once you're going to start
Right.
giving energy out. So it's different for everyone. There's a million examples. Some people like painting, some people like singing or dancing, something artistic that like fills them up. Other people like going for a walk or something that gives you joy. Just make sure you're always filling up your cup, because then you have that reservoir to be creative. The creativity lies inside of you, but as
Right.
long as you're coming from a place of wholeness, then you're good. But if you're coming from a place of like half full, the quality of the content that you bring out in your life, whether whatever job that is that you have, is not going to be the same. So it's just being mindful of where you're at. And my other advice would just to be really kind to yourself wherever you're at. I know for me, as soon as I start feeling anxious, I automatically get mad at myself. It's like, oh, how dare you be anxious? Like you're mad that you're upset. But
Right.
rather
Right.
than being
Right.
mad that you're upset, a new perspective or a new thing that I'm trying is accepting it, being like, I'm so sorry, Julia, that you're anxious. Like this is shit. I'm so like, how can we make this better? It's like I'm a team. I'm like this operation working with myself saying, okay, like what did we do wrong? How can I make it better?
Yeah.
If not, like maybe just give yourself permission to feel that.
Right.
Be
Right. Right.
sad for the day, be anxious, like that's okay. Like go through that experience so that on the other side of that you can experience the opposite of it. So if you never experience sadness, I really don't believe you can ever experience true joy. So just sitting with your emotions can be really great. And to help myself get to that other side, I usually try and talk to a friend or to Martin and just have them listen without them trying to fix it and be like, oh, you should go do a yoga class, Julia. It's like, thank you. I know I'm a yoga teacher. Thanks. I know that could make me feel better. But right now, I just want to say I'm sad and I just want to be sad.
Yeah.
So talking to someone is good. Getting some movement and getting outside are sort of like the ways to get to the other side. But there is this transition period where you give yourself the space to experience that emotion. So fill up your cup as much as you can. But if it is empty and you're not sure what to do, allow yourself to experience that journey.
And thank you for sharing the cup analogy. I never thought of it in that way, and it helps to sort of visualize. But more importantly, I think a lot of people look at their capacity to be creative or productive as hours in the day. I have 8 hours, therefore I have the energy to do this thing. I can be creative. And that's probably one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. And, you know, we might get, whether it's the early hours or late hours, you get really productive, but it's so hard and very seldom to be completely productive or creative for the full 8 hours. And that's because, well, we sold ourselves a lie to begin with, right?
Yeah, the whole 8 hour workday, like I think that's bullshit. I don't think anyone could be that productive for that amount of time, like unless it's like if you're like 100% energy, you can do some things. Maybe it's you have to slow down. Like there has to be some
Some
like
waves
ebb
to
and
it.
flow throughout the day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I use a timer, a Pomodoro timer, so 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off,
Yeah.
and then after 4, you have a 25-minute break to stretch your legs out, and it plays nice music. So like for me, that's how my mind works, because if I sit down and I study a lecture for an hour and a half or 2 hours, I feel like really burnt out, and then I take a longer break, and then by the time I get back to it, it's not the same. But even after 25 minutes, I'm like, oh, the timer went off already. I'm like, I don't need a break, but I still take the 5 minutes. I dance
Right.
around the house, make my tea, and then come back and sit down. And then I can just keep on going,
Yeah.
25, 25. And each of it is like these like great bursts of energy
Right, right, right.
rather than this like drawn out and then all of a sudden like a crash and then like trying to crawl back up, be like, I could keep going. That works for me, but
Awesome.
again, it
Awesome.
can
We're just at the end. And again, guys, for those of you watching, we're going to jump on Instagram. And if we're doing these live streams, we do 30 minutes on YouTube and then we jump to Instagram where you guys can ask questions and be involved in the conversation as well. One last question I want to ask you, and I want to phrase it in a way that, I actually allow you to lean on your expertise. But people often have this plateau, whether it's, I can't be creative enough, or I've hit that sort of writer's block, or maybe even in fitness, right? Where they have a bit of a plateau and they can't seem to push through it. And you sort of talked about this when we spoke on the podcast, years ago. How should someone approach that moment, and how can they navigate that and, hopefully not come out too damaged or burnt out or exhausted from that experience?
Man, that's hard. Huh.
No easy questions on Henry's Live.
Yeah.
We were like, what? You thought we were just gonna talk about cameras and stuff? Come on now.
I thought the movie question was hard, but now this one trumped what's your favorite movie? I mean, look, like everyone has a different journey, and I think feeling like you've hit that plateau is normal. Sometimes it's just a little blip in the mountain before you keep summiting. But I'd say hang out on the plateau. Maybe meditate while you're on the plateau. Figure out why it is that you feel here. Maybe you're on the wrong mountain. And maybe you're not meant to climb up that mountain and you're going down one pathway, but maybe you need to summit down, start from scratch, and there's a whole other mountain that's so much easier to get up to that top of exactly where you're meant to be. But sometimes we're swimming against the current and it might not be worth it. So sometimes we'll say, oh, plateau, push through it. But that was Julia's old mentality, is that I always just kept pushing through it.
Right.
My analogy was that I was always trying to go to medical school in Canada. So I was writing my medical school admissions test, so my MCAT, and I kept getting a 124, so 1 point below the cutoff in the English writing section. I'm not good at languages. I'm a scientist, like through and through. So I kept writing the exam, like, no, I will do better. And I kept pushing and pushing. This is like 6 years of like nonstop studying, just like going after it and just doing more and more degrees on the side.
Right.
And then after I wrote it 5 times, I got a 124, the exact same score in the section 5 times in a row because I'm consistent. The other section, I was getting 100% in the sciences because I understood that. So it's like, okay, like maybe I'm going the wrong direction here. Like, what else? If I trying to climb up this Canadian mountain of medical school,
Right.
and I can't get to the top, like I'm just stuck on this plateau and it sucks. And I was so unhappy and depressed and just demoralized. I'd beat myself down like every single day about it. And then I decided to summit down the mountain, be like, okay, what are my other options? One was becoming a scientist, and that ended up being the best thing ever because I realized even if I become a medical doctor, I still want to be a scientist. So that was great. Did a little mountain there.
Right.
And then I thought, like, maybe there's a different med school mountain. And then I realized, like, oh, Canada is not the only country in the world. There's also a couple other, like at least 100 other countries.
At least a
out there.
handful. At least a handful.
At least
right?
a handful. Like, there's at least that.
Yeah.
And I applied to like some American schools. I was like, cool, I could go to school in America. Then I figured about Australia, that like island way over there.
Yeah. Stay within the British Commonwealth, right?
Right. And I got into every medical school there, and I was like, shit, like, why did I think of this? Like, after years and years of just trying to climb up that same mountain and being so ashamed that I couldn't get there, I'm now at this other mountain that I'm climbing, and it's just easy going, and it's like where I'm meant to be. So I guess my advice would be, maybe you're on the wrong mountain. So if you are at a plateau, sometimes the answer is to push through, but sometimes the answer is to just rethink, sit back, and evaluate other options in your life. And I don't think that's giving up. I think that's being intelligent.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And listen, I'll tell you right now, we don't rehearse these questions, folks. I don't give them any warning. So I truly appreciate Your humility, your empathy, and really being open and sharing that story. Because I think a lot of people, especially now, they might look at this as like this meaty, juicy steak to sink their teeth into. Like, I'm going to be so productive and creative, and I'm going to create the next Picasso masterpiece here. And really, that's when you might be most poised because you're so narrow focused here to hit those plateaus. And I think when you hit those plateaus, like you said it so perfectly, just stop, just enjoy the plateau, just take a step back, widen your gaze, and just listen. I think that's great. Julia, thank you so much. Before we jump over to Instagram and do the Q&A there, how can people support? We got your at Julia Hamer, so make sure to follow her on Instagram. But this is brand new. You have a surprise for us. You just launched something recently.
Oh, yes. I now have my own YouTube channel. It is a yoga channel, so it's called The Fit Brain.
Okay.
I had started. I'm not really good at this YouTube thing. Creators, you should reach out to me to teach me how to be better. But yeah, I have 3 yoga classes on my channel, and I have 70 subscribers. It's a pretty big deal after 2 weeks, I know.
I'm doing a slow clap. Listen.
All over the world. It should be a slow clap. That's all I get.
You get 25 subscribers per video. That's a fantastic ratio to start with. Come on now.
Yeah, so you'll find me on there, and stay tuned for an upcoming podcast release as well.
Amazing. So your YouTube channel is The Fit Brain?
The Fit Brain.
The Fit Brain. Okay. Listen, everybody watching, go and hit that subscribe button. We're going to support you here. And it's yoga classes. You're giving away free yoga classes on YouTube. I mean, what's not to like?
Yeah. My med school diaries are on there too, but those sort of plummeted and failed last year. We'll see. Back to it.
Awesome. Julia, thank you so much for your time. We're going to jump over to Instagram. And for those of you watching, thank you so much. And